Serial killers worldwide are connected by a hidden website, the dark web. Where do I even begin? Well, it all started for me during my sophomore year at college. I was an introvert and kept to myself. My anxiety was always an issue for me. Weed was the best remedy. It kept me sane. It allowed me to function normally in society. Without it, I don't know how I would operate. Unfortunately, weed was illegal at the time. About once a week, I had to go to this sketchy drug dealer's house to get my supply. His name was Chase. All the homes in his neighborhood either had boarded up windows or bars on them. I usually walked to Chase's house, since it was only 5 minutes from my dorm. One particular day, I walked to his house to pick up an ounce of weed. It was a gloomy winter day. During this particular walk, I felt this ominous feeling in the air, almost as if I knew something bad was going to happen. I passed this rundown house that I always thought was abandoned. To my surprise, someone was staring at me from one of the shattered windows. His appearance was rough. He had dirt all over his face and wore a tattered white beater. I made eye contact with him. He started to smile at me with these crazy eyes. I quickly picked up my pace and started jogging. I knocked on Chase's door, but he didn't answer. His car was in the driveway, and I wasn't taking any chances with the crazy guy outside, so I just helped myself in. After opening the door, I knew something was wrong. All the lights were off, and it was eerily silent. Suddenly, I heard Chase yell, "Hands up!" The lights turned on and Chase was pointing an AK-47 at me. He said, "Jesus, kid, I almost shot you. You can't just come in like that, especially after..." Angry and frightened, I yelled, "What the hell, man? Especially after what?" He stopped and said, "Oh, it's nothing. Your weed is right here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a Ziploc bag with the weed inside. Outside of the house, I heard a car accelerating around a corner. The tires were screeching. Chase yelled, "Get down!" I dropped to the floor. Next thing I knew, bullets were flying into the house from the car driving by. Then silence. We stayed on the floor motionless for the next hour. When it felt safe, I called my friend to pick me up and got the hell out of there. The police never even showed up. That's how bad this area was. I promised myself I would never buy drugs in person again, not after that experience. A few weeks went by, and I was itching to buy more weed. My friend suggested I try the dark web. He said it was easy to do, and it would ship right to my dorm. A few online tutorials later, I was buying my first gram of weed on the dark web. 1 week later, the drugs came vacuum sealed inside of a box. Quickly, I jumped on my computer and ordered more. Months went by, and I never had any issues. One night, I just couldn't fall asleep. I hopped on my desktop and logged onto the dark web marketplace I used. I began scrolling past different weed strains to the more hardcore drugs. I knew I'd never buy them, but it was interesting seeing all the stuff you could actually buy. I kept scrolling, looking through the endless possibilities. Most people only think you can buy drugs on the dark web, but this marketplace had boats, planes, and cars for pennies on the dollar, all most likely stolen. But nonetheless, it was cool to scroll through. I finally stopped my nightly search, turned off my computer, and prepared for bed. While clearing my bed, I glanced back at my computer. It was still on. I thought to myself, I swore I powered it down. Maybe not. It was a long day. Probably just a brain glitch. As I approached my computer, it showed the same dark web screen as before. Right before closing out of the browser, I noticed something odd. The top of the screen had a banner ad on it. It was a picture of a bowl of cereal. Next to the bowl of cereal was a handgun. The price said $9,999.99. This whole thing struck me as bizarre, almost as an impossibility. There aren't supposed to be any advertisements on the dark web. My curiosity took over me. I couldn't just leave it alone. I had to click on the ad. The page brought me to a generic login screen. It didn't have any title or anything. It just asked for a username and password. Right before giving up, I just typed admin for both the username and password and clicked login. To my shock, it said success, and the page loaded in front of me. When the page fully loaded, I wasn't quite sure what I was seeing. The site had 3 tabs at the top of the screen. The tab on the left said Profiles, the one in the middle said Current Tasks, and the tab on the far right said Live Auction. Curious, I clicked on the Profile tab first. Almost immediately, my screen was filled with people's faces. I clicked on an older gentleman's face. Immediately, a more detailed profile opened. Below his picture was his name, age, current address, habits, difficulty, and reward. His name was Gary. He was 56 years old. Under the habits section, it read, Gary walks his dogs exactly at 9 a.m. in his neighborhood. He walks them later in the day at 3 p.m. and one last time at 9 p.m. before bed. Every Saturday, he goes to the local grocery store at 11 a.m. Under difficulty, it said, easy. Lastly, the reward was listed at $14,000. I closed out of his profile. I didn't know what to think. I wondered what the reward was for. Was this a human trafficking site? It couldn't be, because the profiles were mostly males. I became more intrigued by the second. I clicked on the Live Auction tab. The page looked like any other chat room. There were usernames on the sidebars. A quick glance at the usernames made me uneasy. Serial Killer 23, Hitman John, Cleanup Crew 2, and Killing Spree, just to name a few. Those were the ones that stood out as odd. Others were relatively normal. A picture began to load in front of me. The picture was of a man who looked to be in his mid-30s. Below his picture were the same details as before on the Profile tab. It had his name, age, address, habits, difficulty, and reward. His name was Pete. He was 36. Under habits, it said every day Pete drives to get his morning coffee at 8 a.m. Next to difficulty, it said hard, and that Pete was likely armed as he was a member of the NRA. Right next to his picture, a dollar amount loaded. It said, starting at $40,000. Messages began flooding in. Hitman John messaged, I will end that guy for $30,000. Cleanup Crew 2 chimed in and said, I will do it for $25,000. A user by the name of Raining Death said, I'll do it for $20,000, and I won't leave a mess like Cleanup Crew 2 did last time. Cleanup Crew 2 quickly responded, well, my last contract was an ex-KGB agent, so not the easiest guy to finish off. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This was a site for serial killers and hitmen, or this was the sickest joke of all time. For a while, nobody said a word in the chat. Someone with a username of moderator said, anyone have a better bid? Going once, going twice? The contract is sold to Raining Death. The moderator then typed, since this is a tougher client, I will allow you 2 weeks to finish the deed. Some time passed. The moderator typed in the chat, Moderator 2, I see you're in the room. Please take over and handle the next few auctions. I went on the sidebar and scrolled down. Moderator 2 was highlighted for some reason. I typed the letter F into the chat box out of curiosity. The username Moderator 2 popped up next to the chat box. I realized I was Moderator 2. My heart dropped. What if I closed my computer and just logged out? Maybe they would track me down. How did a serial killer site have such a vulnerability where admin works for the username and password? Someone made a serious mistake if this site was legitimate. I played along. I responded in the chat, sounds good, I will take over. The next profile that automatically loaded in the auction was an older guy with a beard, age 65, gets the morning paper at 10 a.m., difficulty level easy. The starting bid is $15,000. Cleanup Crew 2 quickly typed, I'll do it for $10,000. Seniors are my specialty. Nobody else responded. I didn't know what to do. I right-clicked Cleanup Crew 2's username. It had a few options, ban, mute, and assign task. I didn't want to be responsible for killing anyone. I right-clicked my own name and clicked Assign. Another option came up for allowed time. I put in 1 year and clicked OK. Messages began flooding the chat room. Raining Death said, "A moderator isn't supposed to assign himself to a person. That's not how the system is set up." Cleanup Crew 2 typed, "And a 1-year contract? This guy isn't a politician. Something is up with this moderator 2 guy. I've never seen this happen before." Hitman John replied, "Definitely an undercover. Quick, get moderator 3 in the room to fix this now." My stomach dropped and anxiety flooded my body in anticipation of what was to come. A notification popped up that moderator 3 joined the room. Serial Killer 23 typed, "Moderator 2 is an imposter. Delete him from the site and fry his PC." Moderator 3 said, "Working on it." Moderator 3 responded, "Haha, the IP pings to a college. His name is Dylan Reeves. Here is a picture." I didn't know what to do. I felt powerless. My whole body was shaking. Messages began filling the chat. Serial Killer 23 typed, "I'll lend him for $500. Raining Death replied, "I'll do it for only $250. All of a sudden, my computer started glitching out. Black command prompt boxes started filling my screen, and all of a sudden my computer's power surged and everything went black. I tried turning my computer back on, but with no luck. I immediately called 911. They sent 2 special agents to my dorm the next day. I told them everything and gave them my computer. They told me they knew of the site and had been trying to access it for years. Since the incident, I've had several attempts on my life. I had to completely change my identity and move out of the country. Never, never go on the dark web." Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.